My next guest I had the privilege to sit down with is a writer and a poet. Within this episode, we talked about transitioning in our 30s, why gender affirming care is life saving. We even discussed the importance of media literacy amidst all the anti trans propaganda, which makes having the ability to critically think is super important. Stay tuned because towards the end of this episode, they also read one of their poems. And so visibility equals possibility. And within this episode, we share how important seeing representations of yourself being reflected equals possibility. I know you're going to enjoy this episode.
Dem Bois, Dem Bois, amplifying, transmitting color voices, yeah, we here making noise, making noise, Visibility equals possibility, you know we them boys, Dem Bois, amplifying, transmitting color voices, yeah, we here making noise, making noise, Dem Bois.
Welcome to Dem Bois Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Aaron, he, him, his. My next guest, they are an award-winning writer, poet, and editor. They are the author of Cut to Bloom, and their work has been featured in many publications. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Sean.
Yes, I'm so glad to have you here. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself for folks to know who you are, name and pronouns?
Yeah, hey, good people. My name's Noah Arhm Choi. Pronouns are they, them.
They, them. And where are you located, Noah?
I'm right outside of New York City in Secaucus, New Jersey.
Secaucus. That's how you pronounce that. Secaucus, New Jersey. Okay, nice. Nice. And so it's a small town feel, I assume?
Definitely. It's very quiet. There's lots of trees here. There's over 100 species of different birds. And a lot of Asian folks. It's like 30% Asian, which is one of the reasons that made me want to come out here.
Oh, nice.
And about like a 15, 30-minute ride into the city. So get my peace and quiet, but also have my access to the city itself.
Love that. And so you mentioned you used to live, before you moved there, where did you live previously?
I was in Brooklyn for 8 years. I had originally moved up to New York to do my MFA in poetry at Sarah Lawrence, and then moved to Brooklyn in the Kensington area for the most part. Love being close to the park with easy access to the city still. But yeah, when lockdown happened, I owned a dog at the time. And I was watching my mom's dog. And I was like, you know what? Let me get out of a place where I'm like touching the same doors 200 other people every day to walk my dog. And yeah, haven't been back since, though. I do go into the city a lot and constantly daydreaming about a commune with my friends. Maybe we all like go in on a brownstone or something in Brooklyn and make all of our queer fam dreams come true.
Oh, that'd be beautiful. That'd be beautiful. Do you feel like how was your mental health from moving from the city, busy city, into now kind of like a slower, less populated area? That affected in any way?
For sure. I think my anxiety in a lot of ways have decreased a lot getting out of the hustle and bustle of the city. Everything's harder in New York, everything from getting groceries to going to a doctor. Just running any kind of errand can become a monumental task. Versus out here in Jersey, I can drive most places, have parking, washer dryer, these things that it's really hard to find in Brooklyn. So the ease of life is a lot easier here, I think, especially with all the nature around me. It feels so peaceful. It's a great reset for my nervous system. But then on the offside of that is feeling far from my community and from queer folks. Whenever I want to go to a reading or event or go out, it's like an hour and a half, 2-hour commute to get to Brooklyn. And my partner lives there. So my nervous system does feel a little bit more settled here, definitely more peace and quiet, less anxiety, but it does come at the cost of like ease of connection to community. So I'm constantly kind of weighing those things between convenience and community. When I say it out loud every time, I'm like, well, of course, community must win out. But those little taxes of living in the city really add up after a while. Constantly in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's also a privilege too, right? If you have access to a vehicle and you're able to commute to where you want to go, where community is, your partner is, and things like that, right? As opposed to if you did and you're like, okay, I'm stuck in this small place, but I have no access to get to where I need to be when I need my feel of my people. You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a privilege. It was such a privilege to move out here, such a privilege to be able to leave the city during lockdown. And that's part of it too, right? Of like, what kind of energy does that privilege free up in the rest of my life to put into things that really matter to me, that are really meaningful to me, that feels impactful to my community. So I think that's part of the scales I'm balancing too.
Mm,
Do I get more energy and more of a reset by living outside of the city? And as a result, can I put that energy towards things that feel really impactful and meaningful to me?
mm. How is the queer community where you are right now, though? Have you explored it a little bit?
No, not really.
Okay.
I think when there's such a vibrant one so close by in Brooklyn, it's kind of like, why
Why wait?
go
Why
to the
bother?
Jersey thing?
Oh man,
Yeah,
you could be missing
exactly.
out on something really, really good though.
You're right. You're right. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I mean, if you already got your people, you know what I mean? You got your community set up and your loved ones set up in place. Why go searching for them? It's kind of difficult, I feel like, to build new, fresh community as we age. So it's kind of like, hey, I'm used to these folks. I know how these folks roll. They respect me. I respect them. So I'm just gonna stick with what I know. Right.
For sure. And I feel like the energy I have now for social things, I want to put into the friendships I already have,
Mm,
as opposed to, trying to make new friends. Because as you're saying, it's so hard to maintain friendships as an adult. Like, I see my closest friends like once a month,
mm,
if that. So, with time feeling so scarce, I think I want to put that energy towards these friendships that I'm already building, as opposed to meeting new folks. And I don't know. I don't know if it's being in the closet for so long that I don't have
mm.
much game, but trying to make friends with strangers has always been so hard for me. I have mad
Ah,
props for people who can do it, but I find it
yeah.
really challenging.
I'm a shy guy, so unless you start a conversation with me, it ain't happening. I can sit at a bar by myself. I can sit at a restaurant by myself, and just not mingle with anybody. And I mean, I don't know if I can say I'm okay with that, but I'm just like, I don't want to. I'm shy. I don't want to do all that.
Yeah, exactly. You
Right?
get it.
Yeah. So Noah, how did that name choose you?
Yeah. It's been fun listening to your other podcast episodes to get ready for this.
Okay.
Um, I actually came across Noah in one of my favorite books called Pachinko. Um, and it's about a Korean family, and there's a character in there named Noah, but they spelled it out um, using the Korean pronunciation of it. And I think it was one of the first moments I realized, like, oh, like Noah is a word I could use both at home in America, but also a word that my mom could say, and a
Mm,
word that I could spell out in Korean. So I sat on it for a really long time. I felt like this like shiny secret I was nurturing in my pocket or something. Um, but when I transitioned and got top surgery, I was working at a high school at the time. So I was really thinking about when I go back to work after medical leave from top surgery, it felt really important to me to have a new name to go by.
mm,
Um, And I love Noah because it is non-binary in some ways. I've met people of different genders who use that name. I really like that. I like that it could kind of capture and be. I like that it was something that felt accessible to my family, especially my mom. English is not her first language,
mm,
um, but I wanted to keep my birth name too. Um, as a way to, like, maintain some of my connection to Korean heritage and culture, um, and I really love what it means, and it's always felt very non-binary to me, um, but my middle name, Autumn, means big hug and lots of rice,
mm.
um, and so I made, what was formerly my first name into my middle name, And I liked that, like, holding on to the parts of my past that I loved and that meant something to me, but kind of foregrounding this chosen name and how I wanted to be perceived by the world. But yeah, pachinko, this is why representation is so scary to people, right? It can
Right.
really change what feels possible for you.
Right.
And that book and finding that name in the book really did open up something for me.
I love that. And you saying that the pronunciation in Korean is different than the English pronunciation?
It's similar, but like in that book, just I think seeing it being used
Mm,
in Korean, like amongst Korean people and within a Korean cultural context, made it feel like it was a possibility for me that I hadn't really noticed before.
I love that. You mind sharing how will you pronounce it, Korean?
It's very close, like Noah. You would just like kind of separate the
Oh,
two syllables a little bit more than you would in English.
oh, got you. Okay. And so just keeping the name and just seeing it in the book and wanting to kind of like for it to be easy for your mom to say, how did your mom receive it when you say, hey, this is my name?
Yeah, I was really nervous about it. I think especially because when I first came out to her as being queer when I was 18, she did not react well.
Mm,
Um, and we really struggled in our relationship for a long time. And what I think one of the really big moments of change for her was at my wedding. Um, and I think what made a huge shift was that she saw that we were loved by our community, and that we had these things that she was scared that I would no longer have being
mm,
queer. Um, and I think that made such a big difference to her. But because of how poorly she took it, I was very nervous to come up to her as non-binary, as being trans. Um, and I really had to explain what both of those things meant to her. And I wanted to do so in a way that would kind of, uh, I wanted to do so in a way that was able to kind of mitigate the language barrier between us. Um, so when I came out to her as non-binary, I actually scoured the internet for articles that talked about they them pronouns and being non-binary in a positive way that wasn't necessarily talking about like suicide risk or mental health issues, but just explaining what it was. Um, and I ended up sending my family both of those articles because I think so much what feels exhausting about queerness is having to educate people all the time. And I wanted to give them time to kind of like read the article at their own pace, process it on their own before we were interfacing about it. Um, and I think, they took a while to like figure out what it meant and figure out what being non-binary is and what it meant for me specifically. But the really big thing I think for my mom was when she came after top surgery and like, we were still at the hospital. I was still waking up from anesthesia. I was still very uncomfortable, but she was able to immediately see how much more relaxed and comfortable I
mm.
felt. Um, and I think that was the real thing for her that was like, "Oh my gosh, like, I understand what you've been talking about this whole time. I understand what this surgery and getting gender affirming care means to you." Um, because she was able to see that, like, difference, so palpable in front of her. Um, so she's been on a very long journey. She lives in Korea now. Uh, but she's also been connecting to different, parents of trans and queer people there, and finding community in that way, and I think just the more reading and watching and learning that she does, she's trying to find different ways to be an ally and to be supportive, which just really goes to show the power of resources and representation and those stories to be able to go find. Because I think her being able to watch a lot of different YouTube clips and read a lot of things really helped her do the processing she needed without putting that emotional labor of her coming to that understanding on me.
Yeah. And when we begin in the transition, we got a lot of stuff we got to figure out for ourselves. So it's like I got to figure out me, and I got to coddle you and explain it to you. It's a lot, right? What you mentioned that you sent her the article. Did you give her a warning before you sent her? Or you just popped it in her inbox and waited to see what she would say.
I probably had like something in the email that was like, "Hey, I've been thinking about something, want to share something big with
Uh-huh.
you. Here it is." But no, not really before that. I've been
Okay.
thinking about it for so long,
Yeah.
But yeah, it makes me wonder, like, how do you give a content warning for like the way you're about to see me is but hopefully going to shift.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I think the articles kind of provided some emotional distance that I needed, and I think the buffer I needed to be able to take that leap.
Mm. You also mentioned explaining to her what non-binary and what it meant to you, right? But then because sometimes when we want our family to get things, we want them to hear from our perspective and get it that way, but we never really ask for feedback. Sometimes we may get feedback, unnecessary or unwanted feedback, right? But like, did you give her the opportunity to kind of express how she felt about it?
Hmm. No, not really. My ask at the end of the email was, um, before you ask me any questions, I would love for you to do some reading.
Mm,
Afterwards, I would be happy to answer questions you have. Um, but this was also in like April of 2020. So obviously, there's a lot going
a
on in
lot
the
going on.
world. Um, and my father had just passed away. So like within our family, there was lots of different things I was processing. Um, so I think in some ways, it was like, I just need you to know this. We
Mm,
can continue to process this as we go. But considering everything going out, my book was about to come out my first book was about to come out. And I'd originally planned a national book tour, but then had it all shifted onto Zoom, which meant that my mom was going to be able to attend this book launch. And, I had come out to other people as non-binary before and was using they them pronouns with them. So it was kind of this like moment of like, all right, my family's about to come. They're about to see other people use they them pronouns for me. I can either tell them now or have them figure it out on their own. Um, so I think in some way I was like, I just need to do this and get this done. Um, but yeah, it makes me wonder if I would, go back and do it again. Would I leave room for feedback, or would it just be like, here's the info, here's my requests.
mm,
If you can't meet those requests, please let me know. But like here, I was just very clearly trying to lay out what I needed from them.
mm.
So hopefully it'll be easier for them to be like, yes or no, I can meet this need that you're expressing.
Yeah. I find it kind of interesting though, because you said that during the wedding, you kind of realized that your mom had a shift and saw that the things that you had were things that she thought maybe that you weren't gonna have. And so that's why I was wondering, like, did you get that type of feedback from her? Or was that just something that you kind of based on knowing your mom that you kind of figured out for yourself? I think that's why I kind of asked that. Like, did she tell you that, or did you kind of like put that together based on her reactions?
I kind of put it together through her reactions and the
Mm,
comments that she made afterwards.
mm,
Um, and some of the things that she had expressed she was scared of when I first came out to her. Um, but yeah, I think the language barrier makes it pretty hard for us to have a lot of nuanced conversations about our emotions. Um, so there's a lot of reading between the lines, which is not the best.
mm,
Uh, I'm constantly trying to think of ways that I can improve my Korean. Um, because, there's like a lot of things that can get in the way of us having that kind of conversation. Only there's a language barrier, there's like different cultural references and frameworks that we do not have the same compass points for. Um, and then outside of like my queerness, there's like so many different ways we view the world. So
mm.
Um, when you can't rely on language to communicate some of those nuances, what else can you rely on? Um, which is why I think, like, another part of the reason I turn to email and articles. It's like, okay, sometimes this, like, face-to-face verbal communication
Mm-hmm.
isn't working for us, so
Mm-hmm.
what's another tool we have in our tool belt?
I love that. So, what would be your advice for somebody listening and like, hey, I want to tell my parents, or would you suggest the same way that you did it? Send an email, or what would be your advice for folks listening who's trying to navigate these same things?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting a gauge of our emotional labor is so important. Um, so what do you have the capacity for, right? Do you have the capacity to hold space for their initial reaction? Is that going to be meaningful or harmful to you? Um, do you need someone with you to when you're talking to them? Um, is it a FaceTime versus a in-person thing? Um, it can be terrifying. Like, you are risking potentially a lot, and there's so many different voices in our head, I think, that can magnify the fear a bit. So, you know, what is going to be the easiest way for you, and how can you have, like, grace around that and not try to judge yourself around what that easiest thing is going to be? Um, I think also I do a lot of different trainings for educators in schools on how they can increase gender equity within their school communities, and create trans inclusive policies and practices. And a lot of what I talk about is sharing our stories is so important and empowering, because when we hear each other's stories, there's different chemicals in our brain that react to that,
Mm.
right? Like oxytocin and different drugs called, like, love drugs or empathy drugs. When the impact of those drugs on people's brain does really increase empathy for the listener. So, telling our stories is really incredibly powerful. Um, so I think, my question will be, what is the medium that feels most accessible to you, that feels the safest for you, that matches the energy and emotional energy you have at that moment? And always trying to center yourself in that, right? I think there's so many things that tell us that caring for ourselves is selfish, when we actually know that caring for ourselves is revolutionary and such a critical part of the resistance.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Dem Bois Podcast. My name is Rachel Campbell, and I'm the Senior Manager of Programs at the Transgender Strategy Center. And we have had the most fortunate opportunity to work with Dem Bois on capacity building in different areas, including leadership and grant writing and fundraising plans. We're interested in expanding our small donor program. So let me tell you a little bit about what the Transgender Strategy Center, or TSC, does. First, we fight for transgender people's right to exist, the basic rights to exist. We invest in building trans organizations' capacity for resilience, meaning we want to keep trans-led and serving organizations around for a long time to come. And lastly, we train the trans leaders of the future. So if you feel so inclined to do business with us or to donate, you can reach us at www.transgenderstrategy.org. And then all you need to do is press donate. You can add us on Instagram at TSCINFO. Thanks again for listening to Dem Boys.
And so, how do folks kind of, I'm thinking of a Rolodex. I'm a little older, right? A little old, but you got the numbers and you're flipping through your Rolodex. And that's how social media is these days, right? We got a lot of, uh, misinformation and trying to get folks to be against trans folks by just spitting out a lot of nonsense, really. I'm just going to say just nonsense. And so, how do you, you know, shift through, like, how is it important for media literacy, right? And so that you don't get sidetracked by all the propaganda. And so especially like for folks who, hey, I don't know the language to tell my people, I want to send them articles, but what's a good article to send, right? Where they're not getting the wrong bits of information and be like, Mom, that's not what I was trying to say. You know what I mean? So it's like, how important is that to kind of like to get it right when we are choosing to send our family members an article versus telling them ourselves?
So important, especially because the propaganda machine is real. I mean, Elon Musk is spending millions of dollars in anti-trans propaganda. And when you look at literacy rates across the country, more than 50% of American adults read at a 7th grade level or below. So, like, critical thinking is something that is an important part of being able to break through that anti-trans noise. And, I think that's also something that feels really important to focus on is what does it mean to increase critical thinking and media literacy? Um, the biggest are depending on us not being able to tell truth from fiction. I'm thinking about so many different laws that have passed that are based on like bogus scientific reports. Right? But if you're like quickly reading a headline or quickly reading an article, you're not really going to necessarily catch all those different things. So I think it also is important for us to think of how can our allies support us in their commitment to increasing their media literacy and helping other people increase their media literacy. But there's some really incredible resources out there. The Trevor Project is obviously one, Land of Legal. They all have really great resources that you can go to. Gender Spectrum also has some great resources as well. So I think it's with anything, like find your people, find the people you can trust. Erin Reed has been a trans journalist who I've been really trying to support a lot through her Substack work, but I also use her research all the time. But yeah, I think getting back to the conversation about media literacy is really important. So, how do you get your community to really think about what are the different lies that we're being fed and how might we be able to shift to that? Politico usually picks a lie of the year that they really want to focus on that was in the news and made it in the rounds, but they, instead of picking a lie for the year 2025, they just dubbed the whole year the year of the lie because of how much misinformation was out there, from everything from Tylenol to trans people to the environment, right?
To body scanners at the airport.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think first step is we just help people realize, how much misinformation is out there.
Yeah, it's a lot. And I just wrote down, is like critical thinking to me, I feel like it's a superpower. Because not too many people, I won't say that too many people can't do it, but I think people don't tap into their critical thinking as like, you can do this. Right. I just think just not too many people want to do it, but it's just mind blowing to me that somebody who is very protective of their money, like, right, Elon Musk, billionaire, who wants to collect more money, right? That you're willing to waste your money to pass out misinformation. That doesn't make sense to me. Why not just mind your damn business and keep your damn money, right? Anyway, but there's a master plan, and obviously they got the blueprint that they're trying to execute these plans, and misinformation and against immigrants, against trans folks, it's a part of their plan. And so we have to be very vigilant of even for folks who have the critical thinking skills of like, what are we taking in, right? Because sometimes I read stuff and I know the shit isn't true, but then I realize that because I have read it, I've internalized it. And so now I'm looking at a situation a different type of way. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's not even of my own design. That's some shit that somebody put into my head. So it's being able to kind of decipher between what's real and what's not. So they're making it very difficult. Yeah. But just like you say, you got to find your people and information and outlets that you trust.
Yeah. And how to encourage that kind of metacognition, right? Of like, you realize that you were acting in a way influenced by something you read because you're able to take a minute and be like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
what's going on? How am I being influenced by my media diet?
Mm.
And I've also had the same questions of like, why are they obsessed with us? Why do they care so
Yeah.
much about trans people? How is it connected to capitalism and money?
Yes.
And all these other systems of oppression, because it must be in order for this deception to
Yeah.
be uh, taking such center stage. And I think this is where really thinking about the ways that transphobia intersects with other systems of oppression has at least been really helpful for me to be like, oh, right, this is all part of the same
Mm.
colonial project that's been
Mhm.
going on. Um, this isn't personal. This isn't like necessarily even specifically about trans people. It's about maintaining binaries
Mm.
because binaries maintain the streams of income. Um,
It really doesn't
right?
make sense though if you think about it. Like you just said, so if from my understanding, if I have a business, I don't know, whatever it is, I'm selling, I don't know, pencils. If I want everybody to buy my pencils, why would I be pushing propaganda saying, about trans folks? No, I want trans people to buy my pencils too. I want everybody to purchase from me, right? Why would you pass on this information and not want everybody to be a part of your business? That's the part I don't understand.
Yeah, and we're trying to put something rational on something that's
I
irrational,
know.
so people will
I
always
know.
get caught on this
I
route. But
know.
it makes me think about how so much products are marketed towards one gender or another.
Mm.
Um, I learned recently that Diet Coke is marketed towards femme people
Wait,
and
what?
Coke Zero is marketed towards mask people. Because men don't diet, didn't you know? And men like black and red. Whereas you think about the Diet Coke
What?
color, it's like white, red, there's like some pretty cursive on it, right?
W-
So if you can't determine the gender of people, then
Whoa.
that messes with your marketing strategy, which messes with your margins. So is
Yo,
that part of why, right? And I'm like,
crazy.
if you Google gender things, it's so funny the list that comes up. Everything from like hammers to alcohol to toothbrushes, right? So the the market really depends on the clarity of the binary. So
Still
is
doesn't
that a
make
part of
sense.
it?
Yeah, but it still doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like I was always raised that if you don't understand it, that means you'll never do it because it's just not a part of how you process information. I get what you're saying. It just to me, it's like I just was like, oh damn, I drink Coke Zeros. I didn't know it was because I like black and red, but I would drink a Diet Coke too. I just don't like how it tastes compared to Coke Zero. So make something more tastier and then I'll try it. I don't know. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of nasty work that gets one gender or another to buy in on your fucking product. Just make a good drink. Who gives a shit who drinks it?
Right,
Jeez.
exactly.
Yo, so I want to talk a little bit about your gender journey. And so you began transitioning later in life, right? In your 30s. I did the same. I started to medically transition, 33, I believe. 34, 33. And so how has that been for you? You want to give us a little kind of story of your gender journey from there into where you are now?
Yeah, a friend was just asking me about if I felt like I transitioned late,
Mm.
um, which was an interesting question because I think in some ways I do feel that way. I think a part of me laments not having been able to transition as a teenager. But I also think a lot of it makes sense for me to transition at a point in my life where I had so much more autonomy over my choices, how my life looked. Um, I was the one that was really authoring like where I lived, how I lived. Um, so it makes me wonder if transitioning would have been possible for me earlier, with before I had that kind of autonomy and authorship over the rest of my life. Um, But I think I always felt masculine, always even before I could really articulate it. Um, And I think my mom could see that ease too, because, she let me have short hair, she let me wear boys' clothes, um, and, all of which changed at puberty.
Mm.
And I think one of the things I appreciate the most about top surgery is that it allowed me to, like, unfurl from the stoop chest and posture that I had for so much of my
Mm.
life. Um, but I think one of the reasons I wish I transitioned earlier is that I spent so much of my life trying to be invisible,
Mm.
in my queerness and my Asian Americanness, growing up in predominantly white places.
Mm.
Um, and I couldn't really articulate what I was hiding, only that hiding felt imperative and critical. Um, but yeah, I think this is another way to consider how powerful representation is. Um, Growing up, the only trans person I saw on TV was the villain in Ace Ventura, which, if you remember,
Oh, yes, yes.
yeah,
Yes. Oh my goodness,
yeah,
yes. Yeah, and yeah, and when it was, I won't tell anybody, but for folks that want to check that out, I'll try to put that movie link in the show notes. But how disgusted they were at the end. Remember that?
definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That was it. And I didn't have a queer teacher of color till I was in grad school.
Mm.
I didn't meet my first non-binary person until I was like 25. Um, and I think that representation really impacted me, right? Like, not only was the only representation I saw of like a villain, but there's just the language for it didn't really exist in the same way, or at least wasn't accessible to me. And then there was like no representation of happy trans people I ever saw.
Mm.
So I think um, that had a large part with why I came out so late. Um, but yeah, I came out as queer when I was 18. Uh, it's such like a corny, typical coming out story in that we were reading Written on the Body by Jeanette Winterson together.
Okay.
And, then she kissed me and I was like, "Oh my god, I think I might be gay." Of course, I had inklings I knew earlier, but that was like the moment that it became clear. Um, and then I realized I was non-binary, like 2017, 2018. Didn't really share it with folks until 2019 and started using they them pronouns. Um, and I was working in high school at the time, so thinking a lot about what kind of model I wanted to be, um, and like claiming my identity and sharing that with people, but also how I interacted with folks when I was misgendered, or um, what it might look like to advocate for myself. Um, as I mentioned earlier, my book coming out too in April 20th, it really made me think about my public facing self.
Mm.
Um, and wanting to make sure that felt as true to me as possible. And I think that really also helped me gather some courage to be more public in my pronouns. And then I got, I started going on hormones in September 2021, and then got top surgery the next year. Um, and I gotta say that, those last 4 or 5 years have been some of the hardest of my life.
Mm.
But I think also unrivaled in many ways on how comfortable, how capable, how at home I felt in my body. Um, I think there's been such a feeling of like opening into myself and opening up to the world, that I didn't think could be possible. Especially after spending so much of my life thinking and strategizing how about to be smaller, quieter, easier to digest. I think one of the things I love the most about having transitioned is being okay with being seen and heard, and
Mm.
therefore having to think about what I want to say, what my message is to the world. That was a part of transitioning that I didn't really expect. That moving from invisibility to visibility, no longer just like asking questions in conversations, but actually offering my own thoughts. I feel
Mm.
like invisibility happens in so many different levels. So I think that has been as much of my transitioning as hormones or top surgery. is moving into that comfort of being seen.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that because, well, for me, the many phases that I was in my life, I've gone through all the letters, LGBT, all of them, right? And I felt comfortable in each phase. I've always been uncomfortable as hell with breasts. That's just, I didn't give a fuck what it was, my gender, I didn't like them. But I've always felt comfortable moving into different spaces. But it's very interesting that you say about being hidden, right? Before I transitioned, I was kind of hidden, and it took, I began transitioning about 13 years now, 12, 13 years. I can't remember exactly, but there was a shift for me because before I went from being ignored as a Black woman to now people are speaking to me or asking me something of advice, or like even just the random head nod when you walk through the hallway, right? If somebody say, "Hey, what's up, man?" I'm like, "Oh shit, oh hey," so it felt really uncomfortable at first because it's like I'm not used to anybody saying anything to me. I had a coworker. We were both managers, and she would always say, "Now that you've transitioned, nobody even asked me shit." So then it was like a conflict of genders, right? So they would come directly into the room and ask me a question, but we're both in the same position, right? But they disregarded her and they just start talking to me, right? And so I thought about it, I'm like, damn, well, I remember where we both used to get ignored. So it's kind of like, now is like I never thought about the visibility that masculinity or just transitioning brings forward when you weren't socialized in that way, right? So it takes some adjusting and some getting used to.
Hey y'all, Pink Lady here. I am the producer for Dem Bois Podcast, and I am so excited to tell you about my production company, Pink Lady Productions. We collaborate with creatives like you who are driven to share your message by launching your podcast from A to Z and coaching you through the process. To learn more about our services, check out our website at pinkladyprod.com. That's PINKLADYPROD.com.
You also said that you never saw. So here on Dem Bois Podcast, and also Dem Bois Inc., we say visibility equals possibility. And so you said that you didn't see any happy trans people. What do you mean by that?
I mean, yeah, I really think it was not until I was in my mid-20s where I saw any models of trans people thriving in relationship, in jobs that they love. I didn't personally know any trans people. I wasn't seeing trans people represented in a positive light on screen, which always makes me think about the Hays Codes in the 1950s, where it was like literal law that queer people couldn't be represented positively on screen. They had to have a mental illness. They had to be dead at the end of the movie. Like they had to end up, quote unquote, straight again. And I can't help but think about the ways that has continued to have a ripple effect in media. And when I think back on like the last 5-8 years, we have seen some incredible representation. Like Fire Island, right? The first like queer Asian American movie I've ever seen in my life. Trans people being beautiful, doing amazing things, having all sorts of different kinds of storylines that aren't just based in trauma. And and I wonder if like part of the strong backlash we're seeing is a response to this kind of incredible representation, and people seeing like the ripple effects of that. Right? It's really disheartening to think about the 4,000 books that were banned last year and all the words that like the administration is saying that we shouldn't be using in government websites or grants. But on the flip side of that is like, oh wow, the word woman is so powerful that you must scrub it from everything. Like the word non-binary is so huge that like you can't deign to say it anywhere. So like while it's terrifying, I think we can also see hope in it too, because it's showing us that by continuing to invest in getting our stories out there, that we are wielding such power.
Yeah, and I think it's also, I feel like before, I didn't see as many older trans folks, right? And I know some young people that say they didn't even know they didn't know that there were old trans folks. Like, no, there are people that came before us, right? We've been here, right? And so just to be able to see, actors and actresses get older and they're trans identify folks, right? And it's like, oh, it gives you that possibility, like, yo, that could be me too. I can be an elder. I'm not ready yet, but you know what I mean? That I can be,
Absolutely.
and be an elder. And so you also talked about gender affirming surgery. And, for folks who've had it, I've had top surgery. You've had it. We know what it means to us, right? I could not fucking wait. It's like the best thing I've ever did in my life. I always say this all the time. If I had to lay them out on the table and get to chopping them off myself, that was going to happen. They was coming off one way or another. I hated them. I've hated them my whole life. And they were ugly. Just really physically ugly to me. And so we know what gender affirming care means to us. But for folks that are listening, maybe they're not trans identified. And they're like, oh, you just mutilating your body or you whatever it may be. Could you kind of explain of like how gender affirming care, not just surgeries, right? Because that it's different for everyone, but just gender affirming care, how is it life-saving?
Yeah, I would also agree that it's the best thing that's ever happened in my life, hands down. One of my favorite facts is that cis people access gender affirming care way more than trans people do. And when you look at statistics for who actually gets top surgery, which if you don't know, if you're listening, is chest masculization surgery, cis boys get it way more than trans kids. And when you think about the ways that like boys get teased for like having, fat on their chest or like teased for all sorts of things, like you can see why cis boys might be driven to also get top surgery. But, like I also like to point out that Viagra is gender affirming care, hair implants, any augmentation to your body to help you feel more comfortable and like you're presenting to the world the way you want to and the way that you feel inside. We are performing gender all the time. So whether gender affirming care can be clothing, can be a haircut, um, right? It can be like smelling like the way that you want to smell. And maybe that means like you're picking up the order from the other side of the aisle, right? I think couching trans rights and inclusion in this greater conversation about gender equity is so important because it's showing that the liberation is all tied up in each other, but how we're all also suffering from this intense need to put us so clearly into boxes. Right. But in that same vein, I think I also find it really important to talk about how all of us are accessing gender affirming care in some way. To not only increase empathy, but like to get the reality of things out there, right? Like one of the first executive orders the administration put out had the title words gender mutilation in the title. And I think that was really purposeful in trying to spread misinformation. But, there's so many cis girls who are taking medicine because they have painful periods or they don't want to start menstruation yet, right? That is also an example of gender affirming care. Um, so, when we are able to be happier, I I have to think about, is that also a threat to capitalism? Because we're then no longer seeking more and more of these external things to mitigate our dis-ease or our unhappiness. Right? Like, why is joy such a threat to the system? I think is something I've been thinking about a lot. Because me getting top surgery shouldn't really be about anyone else or have an impact on anyone else, except I am so much more in my power because I am so much more comfortable. And perhaps that is also part of what's threatening, is for more and more people to be embodied and liberated and to feel comfortable, because I most certainly have been able to put more energy into things that I really care about, like my relationship with my mom or trying to learn Korean, right? Or even in my work as an educator or as an author, all that space that was taken up by ignoring my body, by ignoring my voice, I can now put into things that bring me so much more joy. And I think like that is what I want for everyone. I want the space in their mind and heart that's taken up by anxiety to be freed up to do things that are actually going to fill their cup instead of just help them make it through their day.
I wonder like the connection to capitalism. What is it? Like, what are they sitting in there? I always think of evil people sitting in their dungeons, um, just talking about folks that ain't got shit to do with you, but they're plotting and planning. Like, what's the scheme? Like, what is it really? Let us know. If I'm a part of this scheme for whatever reason, let me know. Let me have a buy-in so I can decide if I still want to buy your product or I still want to do this or I do that, right? It's like it's taking away our choice, taking away our free will to do what it is that we probably gonna do anyway, without you having to manipulate things, right? Or spread misinformation about stuff. It's exhausting.
Very much. Yeah. And I think when I feel that way too, I think one of my strategies is to, again, like reconnect what I'm experiencing to these greater systems of oppression, right? And thinking back on the history of colonialism and how it has often used the gender binary and how well people did or didn't perform masculinity as a way to say, you're backwards, you're uncivilized, therefore we can come in and take all your stuff and take all your land and force you to assimilate into our culture because you're not performing masculinity through this like Western lens that we've decided is the way one should express masculinity. So when I look at the history of gender policing in that way as a way to determine who is masculine enough to be granted power, I start to find some connections when I ask that question of like, why do they care so much about us? But I think I also do that in service of trying to honestly try to feel less anxious, right? Like, this isn't new what's happening. Even though every single year since 2020 has broken the number of anti-trans legislation in our country, this is like old hat. What's going on in some ways. You were talking about the blueprint earlier, right? Right. We've seen this blueprint play out time and again. So I think as a strategy for me, I've been really turning back to trying to find like different political education classes that have talked about these patterns and these frameworks have been going on for a long time to help kind of mitigate some of the anxiety of like, wow, my country is out to get me, or like my administration is out to get me. Because that can be a huge weight, and like talking about nervous systems that never really calm down, right? Like, because there's so much going on, what can I actively do to help out my nervous system? Because it's very easy to just be fearful out in the world all the time.
Yeah, it is, because we kind of don't know what's going to happen. And we see things happening every day, literally every day, right? But you think, okay, well, what is it going to look like 2 years from now? It is kind of scary. I know for me personally, I tap out of social media. That's the one thing I do. I feel like it's just, even like if I turn on my computer and I'm opening up my browser to go check my email, right? I hurry up and do it because I don't even want, like you get the Google messages and like all that stuff to pop up. I think it's just really kind of curating what information that you receive. So it's not overwhelming. So you don't get, it can be I don't know. It's almost like a black hole. It's just like it can be never ending and you don't know where the hell it's going to take you in your nervous system. And so it's really good to kind of regulate that of like how much information you put into, you read or you take in. Yeah.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah. 2026 marks 10 years of Dem Bois Inc. That's 10 years of community care, 10 years of leadership rooted in love, and 10 years of turning visibility into possibility. And so to honor this milestone, we've launched our 10 for 10 campaign. You're like, Sean, 10 for 10, what's that? So we are inviting you, our listeners, our supporters, our allies, and other folks in the community to give $10 a month to help sustain the care, leadership, and visibility that trans men of color deserve. And so 10 years is a very long time, right? That's a decade. Can you imagine raising a child from birth and then looking at them at their 10th birthday party and being like, wow, you've watched so much of their growth within that 10 years, right? That's the same for us. And so Dem Bois Inc., over the 10 years, we have done a lot. And so we have provided gender-affirming surgery grants to trans men of color to obtain gender-affirming surgeries. We started this podcast. We are now in season 4 of the podcast in 2026. We created our Visibility Equals Possibility merch. We partnered with Emilio and Zion, both trans men of color, to design what visibility equals possibility means to them. And it's reflected in our merch. We also partnered with the Black trans man, Mola Flow, to create our theme song. And that's the music that you hear every time you tune into Dem Bois Podcast. We've done merch. We've done partnering. We have delivered care packages to trans men of color in need of personal hygiene items within our community. We have done a lot in 10 years. And so imagine what the next 10 years would look like. Donating $10 a month says, I believe in this work. I believe in the future of trans men of color, and I believe in what comes next. And so if this call resonates with you, join us today. And we've even made it easy. You don't even got to go anywhere. Whatever platform you're listening to this episode, go ahead and open up the show notes. And from there, you will be able to click the link to start your contribution to our 10 for 10 campaign. Your monthly support helps ensure Dem Bois can continue showing up for our community with intention, care, and impact. So thank you for listening and thank you for believing in our mission. Okay, and I'm going to get out of here so you can listen to this episode. Take care. So you are a writer and a poet. I mentioned this earlier about your book. And so you want to tell folks a little bit more about your writing and your career a little bit?
Yeah, poetry is really the thing that turned me from a latchkey kid who was about to drop out of high school to someone who's been working in education for 15 years now. I started poetry because, I was helping raise my little sister. I had a single mom. So when I was going to school, we were like learning about geometry. I was like, how is this helping me survive my life right now? But I walked into this poetry slam and they were talking about like getting your heart broken and taking different kind of risks and like, being queer. And I was like, oh, like they're talking about the real stuff here. And it's a thing that like got me to be in the school building and therefore got me to graduate high school. And I think, poetry has always been this tool of engagement for me. Whether that's with education and different youth and school communities, or as a tool for social activism. I think one of the things I love the most about being a poet is being able to read a poem in a group of people and to feel the kind of instant connection and understanding. And even in rooms where I've like, wow, here I am reading my queer ass trans ass poems to this room of like white cishet older people, and I walk in and like, no one's gonna connect to my poems. They're gonna hate what I have to say. But those rooms have really surprised me with the way people be like, oh, you know what? I've never really thought about gender in that way, or who like stay present with me for the whole time and are like willing to engage with ideas that might be different to them. and really showed me the ways that poetry can be this incredible vehicle to help people walk in your life and be open to hearing about difference. And I think, I love that art form for that reason in a lot of ways. And my first book, Cut to Bloom, was really about coming out to my mom, really trying to navigate queerness alongside of my Korean American identity, really grappling with what it meant to try to belong in queer spaces or people of color spaces when it felt like my belonging in those spaces was sometimes conditional on dialing down my other identities. Um, but the book is really grappling with like, how do I show up as my full self to places? And how do you do that and center love when you're coming from a history of trauma and violence? And what does it mean to choose love despite understanding how broken your heart can become?
Mm.
And what it means to make that choice over and over again, to keep trying, knowing how hard you can fail.
Mm.
Um, I think it took me a really long time to write that book, I think in many ways, because I was scared to be seen. Um, I was scared to have my stories out there when I've spent so much of my life trying to be invisible. Um, but it's been an incredible doorway to connect with different queer and BIPOC communities. I'm working on my second book right now, and also working on a nonfiction book that I hope to be a field guide for educators trying to create trans inclusive spaces. But yeah, I love poetry for how it brings me into different schools, how it brings me into different youth spaces. And I think the ways that we can use it as a tool of political action is so powerful because of the way that it can galvanize people, and make the stakes really clear of the things that you're fighting for. I think, there's, I often think about that quote, like people won't remember what you say, but they'll remember how you make them feel.
Mm.
And I think poetry is able to convey a lot of what we're talking about the life-saving nature of gender-affirming care, how much misinformation or toxic masculinity hurts us all, in like a succinct, like 3-minute experience, that can be so powerful.
Mm. You said that you loved reading your poetry. Do you have anything for us today?
Yeah, sure. I would be happy to read you all a poem.
Okay.
Okay, so a lot of people have been struggling with their identification, and their driver's license. Obviously, we heard about the thing that happened in Kansas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but my whole journey with trying to figure out if I wanted an X on my passport, being really excited when that became an option, and then really disappointed when it was no longer an option. I think also disappointed in how I didn't really feel set up for success when the X became an option to get, because I
Mm.
wasn't really clear what the repercussions of it all. Wasn't clear about what it meant for traveling to other countries that didn't have an X on their marker. Um, and it's an expensive process, right? To like change it to X and then change it back to something else. Um, so I wrote this poem right when that executive order came out that said that X was no longer a valid marker to get on your passport and that you to pick between M and F. Cool. It's called My Passport Doesn't Protect Me Anymore.
Mm.
I wanted to travel to see my mother, but first I had to say, I'm a man. I had to say I'm a man because the last president was wrong. He said I could put an X on my passport because this is the land of the free. He said he was a good ally because he knows what it means to be seen as you are and not what money needs you to be. He let X become a target on my back and called it liberty. A new president says X doesn't exist, says I must call myself a woman if I want to protect women, says he doesn't love me because I'm hard to pin down. In New York, I'm alive. In Texas, a felon. Florida, a liar. No matter what state I'm in, the president says I'm not trans, not a mix of both. Soup bowl and closed doors, broad shoulders and small hands, boss and chin wiper putting bouquets together. America doesn't protect me because they don't know what to sell me. Don't know if I want the man-sized thermos or pink hammer or the 2-car, 2-kid dream. They can't have that, so they're selling tradition instead, banning the in-between, saying you are black or white, male or female, no gray or mix, or free enough to choose my own name. I wanted to go see my sister, but I didn't want to say I'm a man. I wanted to fly to a beloved's wedding, but I didn't want to arrive like water knocked to the ground. I wanted to go to the hospital, not die under the wrong name. I wanted to be myself, even though I'm not a man. But I wanted to see my mother more. She taught me you'll always get caught in a lie. But she also taught me you don't need to be loved to be alive.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, beautiful. Noah, this is the part of the show where I love to ask my guests a random ass question. I got my list here. I'm on 86 questions now. And so just go ahead and pick a number between 1 and 86, and I'm going to read you that question.
Wow, okay. Let's go with 12.
Number 12. So it may or may not have anything to do with what we talked about. So let's see. Number 12 says, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Oh, man. Well, I'm lactose intolerant.
Oh, man. Okay.
So I would have to say, my favorite flavor of ice cream. It's a classic, though. I love a vanilla ice cream bar covered in chocolate. There's some pretty good vegan options these days.
Oh, do tell. What's a good vegan option? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Oh, gosh. What's it called? So Delicious, I think. Yeah.
I've had that.
They got some pretty good ice cream bars.
Yeah, nice. So what's next for you, Noah?
So my second poetry book will be coming out in September of 2027. So gonna be working on that this summer. I'm also trying to get my nonfiction book about creating trans inclusive policies and practices published, and I also hope to be working on that. And really what I'm thinking about next is how to create different community events that are partly there to fill our cups, right? We need to take care of ourselves. This is a marathon, not a sprint, but also engage in some kind of collective action together. So whether that's like writing letters to trans folks who are incarcerated, or engaging in a donation or fundraiser drive together. I think a lot of people are asking, there's so many terrible things going on. What can we possibly do about it? So, how can we take those concrete steps together to not only hold each other accountable, but also, to be in community together, and to grow our practice of engagement collectively too. So, I'm really thinking about, how we take care of ourselves by taking care of other people, and really thinking about what those concrete things are. Because, hate and bigotry wants us to feel overwhelmed, like there's nothing that we can do, right? So any little thing that we can name, I think, is really critical.
Nice. So for people that's listening who want to pick up your books, how can they do that?
Yeah, first one is called Cut to Bloom. It's out with Right Bloody Press. You can get it on Bookshop, any of your local bookstores. The second book is called Stranger I Love. It's out from Yes Yes Books, and will be coming in September next year. So please keep your eyes peeled. I always do a lot of different readings in New York City. So you can follow me on Instagram at noah.arhm.choi. Can keep an eye out for different events. And yeah, we'd love to be connected to more and more folks who are out there doing the good work.
Yes, beautiful.
Amplifying, transmitting color voices, yeah, we here making noise, making noise, Visibility equals possibility, you know we them boys, them boys, Amplifying, transmitting color voices, yeah, we here making noise, making noise, them boys, we them boys.